Welcome to a new episode. I am really excited to talk about self-love in this episode. But before we jump in, I want to take a second to remind you to get your blue blockers on, especially after sunset. So, for those of us that it's getting darker earlier, you want to make sure you've got those blue blockers when the sun goes down and you're still going about your day with the lights on your electronics and all of that kind of thing. I use Midwest red light therapy for a lot of my products that I buy. I get my red light bulbs and my orange light bulbs and all kinds of things there, but I really like their blue blockers. They are good quality, they are not terribly expensive. And so I get different pairs. I have sat on these and they are actually very durable. So I will wear yellow lens blue blockers during the day because during the day you want some of that blue light to get in. That's how your body tells time. But if you're indoors with terrible lighting or on your electronics during the day, then you can pop on those yellow. I wear the orange. That's what you want right after sunset. You want the orange because that's going to block the blue light that would no longer be available outside. So that's why you don't want that blue light because that is going to mess up the signaling in your body. So yeah, get your orange ones on right after sunset, and then right before bed, I throw on my red because the red lens makes it much darker. And we want that darkness because darkness signals to the body that it's time to release the melatonin. So, red before bed. But you want to use a high quality product, just getting it off of the internet from all willy nilly. You don't know if that's really going to work or not. There are quality products. There are some that are really expensive. I like Midwest red light therapy and I like that price point. So you can check them out. I will link Midwest red light therapy in the show notes. And you can use, if you decide to use them, you can use Nourished 10 to get 10% off of anything that you order from Midwest. So check it out. I want to talk about love in this episode. It's coming up a lot, but I want to talk about self-love. I'm not talking about that kind of typical attraction, love feeling. I'm talking about a deep respect and a deep love for yourself. In order for us to have any kind of change or transformation, yes, that takes energy. And I talk a lot about that. I'll probably have another episode where I talk specifically about energy and how to have enough energy for that kind of change and transformation that a lot of us are looking for. But I keep hearing over and over again this theme of really taking full responsibility for our life. And it also involves having deep respect and a love for ourselves. Now, I will tell you, anytime I've heard self-love or I really think about love, and there's even it's a phrase that we use when we're using EFT, which is emotional freedom technique, which is tapping on specific places, the meridians in the body, these little points on the body. And as you're tapping, you can say, even though I'm feeling whatever it is, I use it a lot with anxious clients. So even though I'm feeling anxious, I deeply love and respect myself. And that can feel kind of awkward to say for a lot of us. It even feels a little hokey for me to be like, oh, yeah, I love myself. Okay, okay. You cannot experience great transformation if you don't have some level of respect and love for yourself. So, this has been coming up too in my interviews with people. And by the way, I am putting together a program for people with chronic anxiety, and it's coming together really well. But I'm doing lots of interviews. And so, if you're somebody who has struggled with anxiety in the past or now, and you're willing to talk to me, these are just 20 to 30-minute conversations, typically over Zoom, but we can do it over phone. And I'm interviewing all of these people because I want to make sure that I'm creating a program that really helps people. That is the goal. So I'm not selling anything or doing anything else, and I'm not providing therapy or anything in those conversations. I'm just getting information. So I just have a few questions that I've been asking people. And it's been amazing what's been coming up, such incredible people. So if these are really people that are ambitious, that are overthinkers, that tend to be just a little more on the anxious, worried side of things. So if that's you, I'd love to talk to you. But in those interviews, I've been realizing that one of the key pieces to people transforming their lives and feeling better is not just this taking radical responsibility for your life, but also a deep love and respect for yourself. So if you're somebody that feels like, oh, it just feels a little hokey, I don't know. Yeah, love yourself. Okay, I love yourself. I'm not kidding. I'm telling you, that might be where you want to spend some time over the next few weeks is exploring what does that really look like? What does that even mean? Some people will say, well, that just sounds selfish. Like I'm just so involved with myself. Actually, a deep respect and love for yourself has the reverse effect. So, generally, people who have a lot of deep respect for themselves and a lot of love for who they are, and they feel really grounded in who they are, they're people who generously give of themselves. They are people who spend a lot of time really volunteering or doing things for other people. And they see the best in other people more often than the people who kind of struggle with this self-love piece. And I'm just wanting to say that that kind of transformation that a lot of us are looking for, optimal healing, optimal health, where we want to feel energized and clear and really grounded in who we are, that is going to take really loving yourself in this kind of deep, profound way. So, what might that look like? What would that entail? Are there little tiny things that you do throughout the day that show yourself? They are behaviors, thoughts, feelings of love and care and respect for yourself. Could you maybe just spend a little time noticing those things that you do for yourself that feel like not just self care, like, oh, I brush my teeth, I do these things, even though I think brushing your teeth may be a sign of self love. I think going just a little bit deeper and looking at how you talk to yourself. What is your self talk like? What are the behaviors that really support you feeling comfortable in your own skin, you feeling loved and supported from you to you? A practice that I used to teach, and I'll tell you in case it's helpful to any of you out there, but I would always start my classes by talking about adopting some practice over the course of the class, which was usually about 8-week class. This is back when I was an associate professor and I was teaching the wellness class. And I was encouraging my students to take some aspect of wellness, something that feels really good to them. Could be related to self-care kinds of things, but some practice that they would do for several weeks. I think this was actually an assignment. They could write about it of what happened, and they can pick anything really. And over the however many weeks it was, you just do it daily. And I encourage people to pick something easy, something that you're kind of already doing anyway. You just add on to it some layer of kindness or something wellness related for yourself. One of the practices that I would just offer up to them in case it was helpful to anybody was to greet yourself every morning. So you put your hand on your heart. That releases oxytocin, which is good for you. So even that act is good for you. It's an act of self-love. But put your hand on your heart and you just say good morning to yourself. So I would just put my hand on my heart and say, good morning, Kelli. That's it. That's the whole practice. If you want to deepen that practice in a more advanced practice, is to put your hand on your heart, say good morning to yourself, literally good morning, whatever your name is. So good morning, Susan. Good morning, Tony. Good morning, whatever your name is. I would say, good morning, Kelli. I love you. That is really uncomfortable for a lot of us to say, I love you to yourself. But that is the advanced practice. And I encourage you for, I don't know, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, every single morning to at least just greet yourself with a good morning and your name. with your hand on your heart. And if you're willing and brave enough to add, I love you can do that. This is a mindfulness practice. It has been studied. Dr. Shapiro has some information and has researched this, but I'm not even talking about the research. This is a one and done. You can decide for yourself if this is helpful to you. Any practice that feels like it is giving yourself some self-love, I would encourage you to do that for a few weeks. See how that goes. Notice if it's really uncomfortable for you. If you're like, oh, I just don't even know. I don't know about this whole self-love thing. I would then ask you, all right, how healthy do you want to be? How healthy do you want your life? And then ask yourself again, like, can I really love myself in order for me to transform and have the life that I want? I will say that change is challenging to the mind. The mind usually gets involved and tries to make sense of things. That's what its job. That's what it's supposed to do. And it can sometimes mess us up a little bit because it's trying to keep things the way that they have been, the way that it knows. And when you're creating new neural pathways, because we have these neural pathways that are really worn in our brain. And so that's just what we call programming. And so to override some of that programming that we have, those unhealthy lifestyle choices that we might have, those unhealthy thought patterns or beliefs or feelings that we have, to override that, we actually can feel really uncomfortable. And so if you're feeling uncomfortable, that is part of the process. And if your mind starts doing what it does to say, oh, that's ridiculous, or who knows what your mind might tell you, then just know that that's part of the process. That's what the mind does. And that these little changes that you make along the way to help support yourself, to help support self-love, kindness, energy in the body, higher frequencies, staying in that space of higher frequencies, new neural pathways with new beliefs, new thoughts, right? And these new behaviors that start to feel better, the mind does come along. It will. And your body is always working for you. Don't forget that. I used to think it was kind of like I was sort of broken. Maybe I'm not quite right. My body just doesn't, I had all these little weird chronic illness stuff like eczema and headaches and all of that stuff. So I just thought, I just have this kind of system. I do not believe that. We can transform in any ways. I no longer see the limits there, but also that our body is working for us and is doing its very best to keep us alive. And so far, it's done a good job with that. It just might not have the right inputs that it needs. And if you have symptoms, it's just communication that something is off, right? So in order to really nurture our nervous systems, I think having things that we put in place that really feel comfortable and supportive. Yes, but you might feel uncomfortable at first doing them. So just know that that's part of the process of change. And it does take this kind of commitment, radical responsibility, but it also takes self-love. All right. I have, other than just the practice of doing something kind for yourself, like putting your hand on your heart and saying good morning to yourself. Oh, and by the way, so many of my students would pick that as their practice, and they would write about it or come back and talk about kind of how it felt a little awkward at first, but the benefits of that and how it actually became this ritual and it helped them feel much better and more of the love. And sometimes it would even help them feel the love of a grandparent or somebody that had been really important or is still important in their lives. They could really feel that. And that's the important piece. It's the feeling that. But many of them would say, so I put my hand on my heart, I look in the mirror, and I say good morning to myself. Never in the instructions did I ever say anything about a mirror. It's just not part of the instructions. And I can't tell you how many of them used a mirror to do that. I love the idea. Go ahead and use the mirror. but you don't have to. You can forget, be driving somewhere or driving to work or driving the kids to school, whatever you're doing, and remember and put your hand on your heart and say good morning to yourself. You don't need a mirror to do it, but you could absolutely look into a mirror. But just know that that's not actually part of the instructions. So, other than doing that practice or any other practice that feels like self love, I have this practice that I just did. It comes from Jen Gottlieb. She has a book called Be Seen. And I heard Jen. I don't know Jen. She seems like a really nice person. And I thought it was interesting, this book, Be Seen. And it's really more about her helping people with like branding and marketing and that kind of thing. But I thought it was really quite interesting that I've been thinking a lot about self love and how important that is for us when we're actually trying to heal and improve our lives and live in a regulated, harmonious, coherent inner world and our outer world, right? That because the inner world is first, and then you start to see it in your outer world, and it reflects back and forth. So anyway, she has this practice called the badass list. So the badass list, you write down, and I guess she did this with a friend. You write down all the things that you have done in your life that are really badass. And the point of the whole practice is to then read it back to yourself as if you're reading it about someone else, so that it really layers in how you have done these things that are really quite remarkable. And I kind of struggled to write the list. I was like, I don't really know what I've done that's kind of badass in my life. But once you start and you just start, put pen to paper or you type it out, however you do it, and you just start, and just things will come to you. And I didn't even put that I've been sober for 7 years on it until a few days later. I wrote it, it's like on the side circled, because I was like, oh, yeah, that's pretty incredible that I've been able to not drink alcohol for 7 years. But it started where I was like, okay, well, what's something I've done that's really cool? And I like bungee jumped in New Zealand. That was really good. That was cool. And everyone told me when I was going to New Zealand, oh, you have to bungee jump. That's where it was originated. And I was like, no, I do not. I do not have to bungee jump. And so after trekking, we did a trek, and it's a 3 to 4 day trek. Most people do it in 4 days. I did it in 3 days, and I was hurting from the very top of my head to the tip of my toes and everywhere in between. I was so sore, but I was so proud of myself because I had never done any kind of trekking like that, any kind of hiking quite like that in New Zealand. It was beautiful and amazing. I found out that there are people who run that trek. There's a race and they do it in 1 day, which, you're like, what? That's crazy. But I was really proud of myself for doing it in 3 days. And I was just feeling really brave. So we got to this bridge and where you can AJ hacking, I think is the name, AJ. Anyway, this place where beautiful bridge over beautiful water, and several of the people that I was with were going to do the bungee jumping. And I was like, all right, fine, I'm going to do it. So I did the bungee jumping, and it was quite a memorable experience. I remember like dangling over the water, and they come get you with this boat, and they have like this stick, then you grab onto it, and then they lower you down into the boat. I was like, come get me. But very, very neat experience. So I started writing, and then more and more things come, right? Like all of these productions I used to do in my garage where I would produce them, act in them, write the programs, all of that as a kid. And then scuba diving, becoming a certified scuba diver at 14 years old. And what else is on my list? I went from a fail out in college. I failed out to 4 degrees. So you just start writing these things, and then to publicly announce one of them is part of what you can do in this badass list. So I encourage you to write your list and, just see how that goes for you. I think just the process of it being so awkward was interesting, because I do really struggle with the self-love. I think that's hard for most people to understand, because I spend a lot of time on my own healing and my own health. I eat really well. I exercise. I am always outside. I am getting the light from being outside, sunrise, all of those practices. Those are things because I do respect myself, and I guess that is self-love. But I have always struggled with that a little bit. It just felt awkward, hokey, whatever, to really focus on self-love. The more you do focus on what makes you unique, what makes you you, you have a unique light. We are light. I keep saying that, and people are like, okay, but we are light, and you have a unique light to shine in the world. And the more you really align with that and nurture that, understand that, the more you give. It is not a selfish process. It's actually the opposite, where you're more able to serve and have your light shine in the world. So that's why it's important. It's also interesting. The places where we feel the most resistance and avoidance are often the places with the most magic in our lives. So if you're feeling kind of resistant to that, maybe making the list just feels awkward. Maybe putting your hand on your heart and saying good morning to yourself just feels awkward. Then just be with that. Like there's no right or wrong. There's nowhere to get. There's no place of I mean, well, I guess people would say, well, there is enlightenment, but I think the point of enlightenment, if you think you're enlightened, isn't that the opposite of being enlightened? So really, isn't it just a process of becoming closer, before more yourself, closer and closer to your real essence, the essence of you, which is light? So yeah, that is what I wanted to talk about is self-love, how that contributes to change, how that's helpful for transformation. And just give you a couple of examples of things, just a simple thing like saying good morning to yourself that could be self-love. And then another practice that you could do where you make some sort of list and then you actually share publicly a part of that list. Maybe you share it on social. Maybe you don't want to share it. You want to keep that private. You share it to people that have earned the right to hear your stories, your closest friends, the people who have a lot of empathy and love and care for you. Yeah, but you can just play with it and see how that goes. And you'll let us know in the comments if you try any of that, how it goes. So thanks for being here. Always, always a pleasure.